But you know, the big story today has to be the change in new labor codes. The government's new labor codes, effective November 21, 2025, bring gig and platform workers under formal social security for the first time. Anuj Puri, Chairman, ANAROCK Property Consultants, is joining us now to discuss more on this, to understand what the impact on the real estate sector be overall. We also have Gulam who's joining in from Knight Frank India. He's the Senior Executive Director. Gulam and Anuj, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining in today. While we talk about the labor codes, one of the most labor-intensive sectors has to be the real estate and the construction space, right? Gulam, let me start with you. How big is labor cost as a percentage of the overall construction costs or real estate cost? What could the impact be of this particular change?
First of all, let me put across a very clear understanding that in real estate, land value is the biggest cost, especially in cities like Mumbai. You may have more than 50% of your product cost going through the land value. And labor, in that case, is much lesser in proportion to maybe in, say, Pune or Chennai, etc. So labor cost actually varies from city to city in your overall cost. But that said, the impact typically is from 15 to 30%. Like in a city like Mumbai, I would expect the labor cost to be to the tune of 15-18%. Going to another city like Hyderabad, Chennai, etc., this will change, go more towards 25 to 30%. That is how it is. And the new labor codes we're talking about will definitely have an impact much lesser in Mumbai compared to the other part of the country.
Okay. Mr. Anuj, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Well, the other part, is just a bit of a clarification. Now, a whole host of real estate companies also go ahead and appoint third-party contractors. In that case, do third-party contractors have a clause in the contract saying that any unforeseen cost escalations like the one that we're seeing currently will be passed on? Who will take the hit in that case? And if you could also give us a sense of the quantum of the impact that the companies will see.
Good afternoon, Vivek and Sonal. Always nice to be on your show. So, just like what Gulam said, is that if you were to take out the cost of land, then the overall labor cost impact on real estate in India is about 20 to 25%. In some cases, in smaller cities, maybe 20%, bigger cities, about 25% of the total construction cost. So with the new labor laws, this baseline labor cost, we believe is expected to go up by 10 to 15%, which will translate, maybe 3 to 4% increase in the total development cost. And, there's sort of a breakup of how this is going to happen. Much of it is in the basic construction labor, but it is also in the labor overheads. We've seen the changes that are being made in the gratuity, in the provident fund, in the wage revision. And the rest of it is really indirect labor cost, maybe 1 or 2%, which is on safety, amenities, health, etc. So overall, we believe is that the cost that is going to have an impact is about 20-25%, leading to maybe 3-4% on the cost of construction and increase. Majority of the vendors will have an agreement signed with the developers that if there are any government charges which increase or due to any change in the law, then the developer needs to pay for this. So the vendors will not take this into account in their own balance sheet. They would necessarily have the clause to pass it on to the developer. And the developers would, for their unsold inventory, pass this on to the buyer. Clearly, we've seen the balance sheets of the developers. They don't have ability to be able to absorb the additional cost of construction given the profit margins where they are at this moment in time. So ultimately, this increase in the cost will get passed on, 3 to 4% to the home buyer.
So this cost could be passed on to the buyers. That's very important from a buyer perspective, because while the hit is coming on the balance sheet of a real estate developer, ultimately it's the buyer who could be impacted, considering that it'll be passed on. Gulam, if you can give us a sense of if there are any labor shortages that the industry is currently seeing, and if this particular change could resolve the industry of that problem, because this was an indication that was suggested by some of the real estate companies as well, that labor has become a big issue. Is that true, first up? And if that is true, do you think these laws, if implemented properly, could get rid of this issue?
For sure, the shortage of labor is a big problem for the industry for last at least, in fact, post-COVID, we've seen this actually worsening. Many of the players that have actually going towards automation, using AIs, etc., trying to find ways to manage it, but it only means additional cost. But the old ways of getting skilled and unskilled laborers whenever you need it is a big problem. That story is bygone. So today, when we are talking about this big change, at least in the interim, as Anuj was talking about, with an additional impact on cost, etc., and of course, it will require so much of compliance. So we are going to be actually going through a transit phase during which the shortage will be felt much more. Because when the developers would be putting their records in order, trying to be fully compliant, there will be a period of at least a year, if not more, during which this, the new ways of doing business will also have a huge impact. So not just labor shortage, but becoming full compliant also will take time. So in times to come, at least a year and a half, we shall see huge amount of concern coming from developers, especially focusing on availability of labor.
Right. Anuj, coming to you, a two-part question. First up, currently, what is it that construction players actually offer in terms of compensation in case of accidents or any untoward incidents that do take place? And secondly, there's actually been quite a lot of opposition when it comes to unions towards this particular move. That's a bit surprising. So how do you think, their concerns can be addressed?
So clearly, the good quality developers, have all the schemes. Not only that, they will pay market rate to the labor, but in many cases where the skilled labor is there for RCC framework or for carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, they will pay maybe 10 to 15% premium for the labor. And clearly, we've seen is that during COVID and post-COVID, the way that the good quality developers are providing worker welfare, housing, safety, amenities, health benefits. Many of these have taken insurance from the insurance companies. They would not only do that, they will also train them. They will be very, very compliant, because they're seeing that if you are investing in the laborers at the site and you're giving them better quality conditions and better housekeeping, you give them food, the productivity of the labor is going up. Just like what you asked in the previous question is there a labor shortage? Yes. Now, is there a possibility maybe with these changes you are going to be able to bring some of these labor back from the villages? Possibly. But also what is important is to see how you can increase the productivity of these laborers. And that is what these developers really do, is that they invest in the welfare and make sure that there is all, things provided to the laborer, from, housekeeping to housing to safety to training and the entire compliance of the labor laws.
Okay, we take that point. Gulam and Anuj, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today and explaining to us the impact the change in these laws could have on the real estate sector as a whole and the buyers as well. Very important to note that. So thank you so much for joining us with that. All right, with that, we'll do one thing. We'll slip into a short break. When we come back, we'll get you more on the markets and stock-specific action. Stay tuned for that.